Welcome back to Hardball and the Politics Fix. Tonight we're joined by Hitchens of Vanity Fair and Peter Beinart of Time Magazine, whose cover story, The New Deal, is out this week. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Christopher. What do you make of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State? Mr. Hitchens.
Look, this is the woman who played the race card on Barack Obama. This is the woman who, if you were for change that you can believe in, or whichever change it was, you were voting against. This is the woman whose foreign policy experience consists of making a fool of herself and fabricating a story about Bosnia. This is the woman who, with her husband, have so many connections, fundraising connections overseas, Indonesia, China. Just look up the Senate report on their fundraising activities, the people they've pardoned, the amazing brothers of hers who nearly got the, was it the nut monopoly in Kazakhstan or something farcical like that. Just look it up. It's a ludicrous embarrassment for the president and for the country.
Well, why is he look, we all know that Barack Obama's got a lot of candle power. He's a smart guy. He's politically adept. He won the presidential election as the first African American. He's going over hurdles nobody thought anybody could do. And yet here he is with his biggest news story since his election. Everybody's buzzing about it. Why would he let this toothpaste out of the tube if he's not going to do this thing?
Well, it's clear from what we've gleaned that the job is hers if she wants it. Yeah. So it's Clinton redo, not just Rahm Emanuel. Whatever this is not change.
Yeah. Well, let me go to Peter Beinart. Peter, where are you on this?
I just totally disagree. I mean, I think she'd be very good. Bill Clinton's foreign policy was very good, particularly in the second term. I think its second term of foreign policy was about some of the best 4 years of foreign policy America has had in a very long time.
Well, that's okay, but this is a subordinate position she's accepting. Do you think she would fit in a subordinate position? In other words, advocating Barack Obama's foreign policy, not hers. It would
be in her interest for the Obama administration and her Secretary of Stateship to succeed. And she has a history of when she's an incredibly hardworking, very tough, very smart person. She made a success of the senatorship from New York. I think she'd make a success of it, yeah.
Well, I probably disagree with Hitchens on this, but I am very suspicious when John Kyle, a major supporter of the war in Iraq, a complete hawk, a neocon in many ways, complete hawk, supports her for this. Henry Kissinger's come out of the woodwork. He supports her for this. Why do these establishment conservatives want her? What are they up to? Why do they want her? I don't know what they want.
Don't compare Kissinger to Kyle. I mean, Kissinger is a critic of the war and a so-called realist and someone who likes leaving.
Well, why do they both want her? They're both Republicans. Why do they want her?
Because she's a status quo type and they know they can, so to speak, trust her. She's a member of their club. Just a comment on what Peter said a moment ago. If you remember, and I'll drag you back to this Bosnia farce that she inflicted on us during the campaign. Actually, when there was pressure on the Clinton administration, Les Aspin was Secretary of Defense, you remember, to do something about Sarajevo, to stop the killing, to prevent the ethnic cleansing, Hillary Clinton moved in hard on her husband and said, don't you do a thing about Bosnia, it'll spoil my wonderful health care plan, which should be front and center. You remember how beautifully that worked out, too.
I'm not sure I think that's an entirely accurate accounting of her role in the Bosnia. And the reality is that Clinton, albeit very late, the Clinton administration acted very well in Bosnia in 1995.
Over her objections.
I'm not sure it was over her objections.
Yes,
I think, in fact, you can't have it both ways. You can't accuse her of being too hawkish and also attack her for being the dove on Bosnia.
Okay, Peter, let's talk drama here. No Obama drama, that's his nickname, because he doesn't like sideshows. He doesn't even like interesting staff people or colorful staff people like James Carville and people like Stephanopoulos. They never would make it on his team. He likes quiet, gray-suited people like Axelrod and Pluff. You don't even know what Pluff looks like. He doesn't like personality around him. Why would he bring the two biggest personalities in our lifetime into his cabinet, into his world, where anything Bill Clinton does, it's interesting to him? Why does he want Bill Clinton to explain?
Rahm Emanuel is quite a character, and that was his first choice. He's not a quiet, retiring guy. I think Obama likes talent. I think he likes really smart people.
Why does he want drama?
Ambitious.
Why does he want drama?
I think he thinks that it's better to have the Clintons inside his administration than out, and I think that he thinks that she will do a very good job and that her interests and his interests will be basically aligned.
As you know, there's a verb missing from what Peter just said. When people say you want them inside rather than out, there's a very important word that I can't use on your...
I know the word.
Yes,
but the question is this.
Sure, but
Bill Clinton...
Just before we leave the Kissinger point, remember, Kissinger had to decline the honor that Bush wanted to give him of being chair of the 9/11 Commission because it would have involved mentioning the names of all the people who he had business dealings with around the world. And he wasn't willing to do that with Kissing Associates. He didn't want to expose his clientele.
Okay, will he accept the deal?
The same thing, believe you me, is going to come up with the Clintons.
Okay, gentlemen, I want to... Lynn Sweet of the Chicago newspaper and sometimes had an interesting question. In fact, she proposed it. If it's about prospective deal-making, he'll accept the fact, whatever it takes to get his wife the Secretary of State job. If we go back into last week, what he did, who paid for his airplane travel to Kuwait, for example, or anything like that, he won't go along with it. Will he accept a prospective deal, Peter, whereby he won't take any money from any foreign leader from now on or foreign interest? Will he accept such a deal?
I think so, and I think it would be a good deal. Look, if you believe, as I do, that Hillary Clinton would be a good Secretary of State, I think the best of the group that have been mentioned out there, then I think that's a perfectly acceptable deal to make.
I think
well, who's going to pay for Bill Clinton's next airplane trip abroad? Peter, you got to answer that question. Who's going to pay for the next trip abroad?
Whoever it is, it should be publicly disclosed. I completely agree with you.
We'd also like a full accounting.
And that's
We'd
good
also
enough.
like a full accounting from all the Chinese and Indonesian witnesses who were fugitives from justice rather than testify in the last Clinton fundraising hearings.
Well, Mark Rich,
we need to know what happened to that money now.
I really don't think most people besides Chris, with all due respect, are really interested in rehashing all of the scandals of the 1990s.
No, it's a question whether they're all coming back, sir. That's the question. Rehashing or reliving is a bigger question. Do you want to relive them all?
Yeah, and who owes who for what? We now need to know.
It's a good question.
It'll have to come back up.
I don't really think we need to know. I think we need to have full disclosure about what Bill Clinton does in the future, and I think we have to have a debate about whether we think Hillary Clinton would be a good secretary.
Fine, I'm going to come back on that point, because I think you can make the case that if Bill Clinton's willing to really play ball with this, it might be the smart Lincoln-esque move. We'll be back with Christopher Hitchens and Peter Beinart. The more about the Hillary prospect. Boy, it is the hottest story, but this campaign isn't over.
Christopher Hitchens and Peter Beinart talk politics here, and Hillary Clinton. You know, both of you guys support the war in Iraq, right? Both you guys.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this. Fair enough. We argued about that.
It's an intervention in Iraq.
Well, that's great. Just like the incursion in Cambodia.
I think I recanted, but
okay, the recanted is good, but it's not effective. Let me ask you this about this question. When I first heard about this thing, I've been of two minds about this Hillary appointment for Secretary of State. I thought one thing he might be up to is really Machiavellian politics. Not the old thing, keep him in a tent instead of the outside the tent. But he may have to cut a deal in the Middle East. Bringing in Syria, cutting some deal where Syria separates itself strategically from Iran. Perhaps Syria separates itself from terrorism, which would be the deal with Israel, giving back the goal line, but getting something like 67, some kind of big deal that makes history and good for everybody. But the only way to do that, if you're going to be a little bit tough on Israel, is to have somebody who's a little bit to your right. You start with this, Christopher. You really know the region. Somebody a little bit to your right, a notch or two to your right on the issue of Middle East politics. Hillary would give him cover in such a deal. Is that the Machiavellian piece here?
Well, now you make me think about it. I mean, her speeches in favor of the intervention in Iraq were pretty good because she had followed what her husband and Vice President Gore had been saying and doing about Iraq. She knew in the case that the Baathists were linked to Al-Qaeda, that they were dicking around with weapons of mass destruction privately and so on, was a very strong one, stronger than most people still believe. And her vote was a more impressive one for that reason. She's been very, 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 very uncritically pro-Israel, though, at all times.
Well, is that helpful to him? Does that help him cut a deal that's never going to make everybody happy? We know any Middle East deal is unpleasant, to put it lightly. It's also a security threat. Every deal where you give an inch of territory away makes your security that much more difficult. In fact, your existence more perilous. So does he help her in that regard, if that's what he intends to do, make history in the Middle East?
Yeah,
is that the plan? Also, I don't know what the plan could be, Peter, if it's not that. Why else put her aboard?
Well, I actually think that he may well think that she's a very smart, tough, competent person. But I also agree that you make a good point. I think it's probably less relevant with the Palestinians right now because it's simply hard to imagine a deal with Hamas. But vis-a-vis Syria and Iran, I think there's a reasonable point to be made.
Well,
but they don't. I mean, they're not powerful enough to make a deal with. But on Iran
you're making my life troubled here. I'm talking about if you can do the deal, is she the deal maker? That's what I mean. And Bill Clinton aboard.
I think on Iran, which is the big player here, making a deal which would change the regional calculus on Iran and end the standoff between the U.S. and Iran since 1979. I think you're right. I think she would help to give political cover. That's also the reason you've had people like Dennis Ross very much in the orbit, because I think there's a sense that he would be good at negotiating the region and good at selling it back home.
That's why I'm surprised at Hillary, because you have a mixed mind here, because you don't trust the Clintons, but you are a bit more hawkish than the Clintons. Christopher, so I'm just wondering why it wouldn't be in your interest to see the Clintons in there, because it would move Barack to the right.
Well, on the crucial issue, Christopher, that we've all been afraid of for years, that a messianic regime, a fanatical regime, will get hold of apocalyptic weaponry, We're now very close to finding out what that's going to feel like, and to live with a regime that even if it won't go mad and use them, will be able to use those weapons to blackmail us.
Right.
Now, both the senators, Mrs. Clinton and Senator, our President-elect, have said that will never happen.
Can we come back? Christopher, can you come back? We have to, this is too big. We have to come back and talk about this. Thank you, gentlemen. Peter Beinart and Christopher Hitchens. We're out of time. Right now.